Welcome to Group Talk, a podcast conversation from the Small Group Network, focusing on topics relevant to small groups ministries. Whether you're in a church of 100 or 10,000, whether you are a volunteer or staff, we want to support, encourage, and equip you to lead well. So relax and listen to today's program.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Group Talk. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Carolyn, Taketa, your host and the small groups pastor at Calvary Community Church in Westlake Village, California. Well, if you've been listening to Group Talk for a while, you know that we try to address a wide variety of topics, from big picture ministry philosophies and strategies, from broader trends from culture and the Christian world that affect group life, as well as different ministry models and practical topics on various aspects of leading a healthy small groups ministry, including nuts and bolts of leading through specific challenges that inevitably arise. So today on this episode, we're going to drill down to one of the most basic, super practical, a mundane but a necessary issue that comes up in virtually every small group ministry around the world, and that is childcare. Well, when you have adult small group ministry, the adults often are parents who have to figure out what to do with the kids while they are in a small group meeting together. And if the parents don't have regular babysitters or family nearby or money to pay for a babysitter, childcare can be a really major barrier to engaging in a small group. So it's important that we have some strategies on how to handle that so that we have more parents that can be part of groups. So to talk about childcare options for groups is Derek Olson. Hey, Derek, thanks for being on the program.
Hey, Carolyn, I'm excited to be here and super excited to tackle this topic with you.
Wow, you may be one of the only small group pastors excited to talk about childcare. It's kind of almost a necessary evil for a lot of us. Well, if you've had involvement with Small Group Network at all, you know Derek's name, or you may know Derek personally. He is the guy behind the scenes who oversees all aspects of the Small Group Network, including Group Talk. And recently, Derek wrote a blog for the network on different childcare solutions, and it was on our Facebook conversation as well. And actually, childcare, I think, Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to come around on our Facebook interactive group on a regular basis.
Absolutely. I mean, it's always popping up. And, how do we effectively do childcare? And so you're always seeing questions and answers, and I'm always trying to give answers. And it just didn't seem like there was a ton of tangible resources to share with people. So it finally dawned on me, write one.
Yes, on that very exciting topic. And Derek has experience since 2004. He's been leading small groups ministry for youth, for young adults, for regular adults, and he is a native of the Pacific Northwest, but he served in churches of various sizes located in various states. So he's dealt with this issue in a lot of different contexts, and that's why I think he's actually really helpful for us to have this conversation together. And also, Derek, I know you have an adorable 4-year-old daughter, and so this issue hits home for you because you don't have family nearby, and you don't have built-in babysitting unless you have a secret nanny somewhere that I don't know about. So you have to deal with childcare to be in your groups.
Absolutely. After moving down here to Southern California, my wife and I started our own small group here at Saddleback Church about 9 months ago. And so our small group consists of 3 families right now, which includes, get this, a total of 6 kids that are all 4 years old or under.
How fun. So fun.
And to make that even better, we have one of the moms has a baby on the way, so we're gonna have 7 kids. So
now outnumbered.
Yeah, the kids are going to outnumber the adults, and it can be absolutely crazy at times. And to give you an idea how crazy, I'll share a little story with you that happened last month. And so we were having a small group. It was a great night, and us guys were watching the kids, and the kids were being so angelic this night, and they were so well behaved that us guys got a little selfish, and we were like, you know what? Let's all go play some video games for a minute. And so we were playing on the PlayStation, going back to our childhood days, and the kids were so great.
In a different room in the house?
Kind of right around the corner.
Oh, okay.
And so, we were still keeping an eye and an ear, right? But all of a sudden we hear this commotion in my daughter's room, and we hear some rumbling and tumbling and screaming. And then we hear the stampede coming out towards us. And here's all these here's all these 5 or 6 kids, and they're screaming, "We went fishing." And of course, we're distracted playing video games, and so it takes a second to kind of focus in on what's going on. And we're like, what's going on? Like, "We went fishing." And then I realize my daughter's little friend, who's also 4 years old, she's like the leader of the pack, and she's holding her hand out. And by the tail, she's holding up our pet betta fish.
Oh, that's so sad.
And I had just bought this for my daughter as her first pet ever, like a couple weeks before.
I was sacrificed.
And so I let out a shriek, and I grabbed Mr. Betta Fish, and I run him back into the room, and I throw him into the fish bowl, only to realize that probably sealed his fate, because they had turned the fish bowl into like stew with Play-Doh.
Oh my gosh.
And
I can still picture this. Oh my goodness.
All kinds of crazy ingredients. And so, as any animal lover would, I went and found some fresh water in a hurry, threw them in a jar. But sadly, Mr. Betta Fish didn't look too well. And the next morning, he went to fish heaven.
As you've explained to your daughter. All right, so you had to sacrifice a fish to the cause.
Yeah, so this whole child care issue is very real to us in our context, in our season right now, as small group leaders with all these kids. And so we've been asking ourselves, how do we do childcare effectively so that kids are safe, so that they're having fun, but so that also we as adults can enjoy the small group experience, can go deeper in prayer and discussion. And so that's really where all this came from.
Yes, and we don't want any fish being sacrificed in other groups. It's a great story. All right, so let's run down. I think you talked about 7. Maybe we'll come up with some others, but let's run down what these options may be. And as a caveat, the options really depend on your church, your culture, where you live, what type of homes people have, what type of groups you're hoping to foster. I mean, there's a lot of things. So these are just ideas. There's no one way to do childcare. I've been doing small groups ministry now as a vocation for 14 years, and there's no one size fits all for this. We have groups that do all of the ones that Derek's going to share with us, and then I've come up with some creative ones of their own too. So you almost have to try them out and then see what works best in your context.
No, absolutely. At 100%, you're right on, Carolyn. These are just ideas. And in fact, I gathered a ton of these ideas from our Facebook group, the Small Group Network Facebook group community, because there's so many people asking these questions and there's so many people giving answers. What I did was I read through literally, I think, hundreds of comments and tried to boil it down to like the top 7 most general popular ideas. And so in no way is one of these the only way to do it, but it's a great way to kind of start to think about things.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so number 1, the swap solution.
Yeah, and I would say this is probably my favorite right now because this is what my personal small group uses, and it's been a game changer for us. And how this works is, at some point in your small group gathering, obviously you're going to build in a time where everybody's together, adults and kids, having fun, eating food. But when you get to that portion of your small group where it's the study time or the discussion time, this is where the swap solution comes in. And so what you do is you take the adults in your group and you break them into 2 parts. So in our small group, we do guys and gals. You could
Which is typical for married couples groups, yeah.
Exactly. You could do, those for adults and these for adults.
Sure.
But either way, you break the adults into 2 separate groups, and they take 30 or 4 minutes. So while one group is watching the kids, having fun, drinking coffee, enjoying dessert, the other group is enjoying the video curriculum and talking and praying. And then once that allotted time is over, the groups simply swap.
Oh, okay. That's a great idea. And then what about like prayer time? So they kind of incorporate prayer when they're with that. They're the group that doesn't have the kids with them. They kind of run through that as well, the support time.
Exactly. So like in my small group, we when we meet at our house, we're in a smaller little condo setting, and so space is limited. So like the ladies will usually take 40 minutes first, and they'll go out on the patio.
Okay.
They'll watch the video curriculum like on an iPad, and then they will have a discussion time and then prayer. And us guys, we're inside again playing video games. Not really, but
well, not anymore. I'm sure your wives really loved what happened.
Yeah, we learned never again, right? So we're providing quality childcare, literally drinking coffee, having a great time. And then in our group, then we make the swap. And for us, it works good to have the guys go last because the ladies are a little better watching the kids, and that's when the kids are more tired.
So that's okay. Another version of the swap is where you don't necessarily break up within the same meeting time, but you swap weeks. So we have groups that'll do, one night, the first Wednesday of the month will be the guys' night, second Wednesday is the gals' night, and then the third is all together, and they'll do maybe worship or stuff that's kid-friendly, crafts, or it'll be a serving time. They might go make lunches for our homeless ministry, do something as a whole family together, and then the fourth is, kind of a special night of whatever they choose to do. So they swap kind of whole nights rather than within the night. And then the other thing to save time when they use the swap method that as you've outlined it, we have some groups that do that as well. They'll watch, if they are doing a video curriculum, they'll do that on their own time, so that they have more time for discussion and prayer, because that cuts out another 10, 15 minutes. That's been effective. And not just the childcare groups, but other groups too. If you cut out the video time, you watch it on your own phone or whatever right before or day before, that seems to also make the time with the kids a little bit less disruptive, because just a shorter framework time. So those are some versions. So as you can see, here's just one option, but there's lots of variations off of it. But that's a great idea to think through the whole swap thing. And you get to bond. What I love about how you guys do it, Derek, and the way you framed it is you get to bond in those smaller circles, especially if you have a larger group and the group gets to be about 12, 14. It's nice to have the smaller times together at 6 or 8.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
So second option, the rotate solution. I love how you think. Okay, so Derek also helps us with communication. So they all have these snappy titles. The rotate. What is the rotate solution?
Yeah, the rotate solution. And I stole this out of Steve Gladen's book, Leading Small Groups with Purpose. And this is basically where you rotate out 2 parents or 2 members out of the group on a weekly basis to provide childcare in another room. And so this is best done in pairs, obviously, to provide company for the adults and add accountability for the kids. And as Steve would say, never rotate out a married couple, but instead send 2 men or 2 women so that they can get relationships built for themselves.
Yeah, that's a really important point, that you don't say, okay, the married couple does it, because then they both miss out. Whereas if you have just one of them there, then the other person can fill them in on what happened, and they build a relationship. So it's such a little thing, but that would make a really big difference.
Exactly. No, it's a critical difference, but that's a great, real simple solution that I would encourage our listeners to think about.
Yeah, another variation of the rotate we've done is we've rotated houses. So we do our small groups ministry by geography. So if you live close enough, within a couple miles or a mile, we realize that the house that always hosts, if you have children, always gets trashed. And fish are sacrificed. This is just a reality. So we thought, everyone should share the pain together. It's part of being part of the community. You share the burden of this. And so we would rotate homes. And sometimes we would put the kids in one home if these homes are close enough and big enough, and they would pay for a shared babysitter. So we would all chip in, $5 or whatever, pay for a babysitter that somebody trusted and knew, put them in one house, or just upstairs in a different room with a babysitter, and then we would all kind of still be able to meet together. The rotating home thing became really interesting because we had different people in different homes. The kids loved it because it meant new toys. each time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the kids actually had to learn how to share. If you're a kid who is only child, like that's a little bit hard for them. So they got to share and they also got to play the host. So we actually realized, and our own small group did this for a number of years when our children were younger, and it was a love-hate thing with hosting. They kind of liked being like the one in charge, but then they didn't really love their stuff getting played with, not all that gently by some of the others. We had like 13, 14 kids.
Wow.
Because people adopted kids, and so we were way beyond the adult number. But as they got older, it got easier, and you can put on a video for a little bit of time. But the idea of rotating homes really made people appreciate the effort that the host has to put into for their playroom and for the sacrifice that those kids in that home have to make. And that didn't click until we kind of had people rotate homes and try that out and make that more egalitarian. But the kids, absolutely, that was a huge fan with the kids. So that's another version of rotating.
That's
all right,
great.
Number 3, a trade solution. What is that?
The trade solution, yeah. So if your group meets on a Tuesday, let's say, and you know of another group that meets on a Thursday, you can offer to watch their children while they meet, and then you can ask them to do the same for your group.
Okay.
So obviously there's, a trust factor there.
I was going to say, yeah.
This is obviously people that you trust and you know well, but like us at Saddleback, there's so many small groups, and so many of our friends and peers are in other small groups. So this is, for us, it would be a decent solution we could try out if we needed to.
Yeah, and I think even in a smaller church actually may work even better, because in a small church they would know the other adults, so it may almost be easier to trade with another family or another small group and kind of serve each other that way. So I haven't tried that, but that's interesting. And I guess as a small group point person would have to kind of facilitate that a little bit, or at least put the idea out there and have them help them find each other on the different nights. So yeah, that's kind of cool. It's a little different. Number 4, use your church's midweek ministry solution. This is a fun one. So you first, tell me, and then I'll have some pushback that I've heard for the solution.
Yeah. Yeah, don't you love how I titled this? Use your church's midweek ministry solution. So if your church provides some type of, midweek kids ministry or childcare, parents can literally drop the kids off at church, and then they can just go head to their small group afterward. And some churches who even have the space might allow for small groups to meet on campus during this time to make it easier.
That would be, yeah.
But there is a lot of groups that I believe are using this solution. And again, it's smart because there's a childcare solution right there.
Okay, so the pushback on this, and it usually will be the family ministry pastor, the early childhood director, is that they do not like their ministry to be used, quote unquote. So you need a better word if you're going to promote this. Leverage, maybe. I don't know. This needs some wordsmithing to not sound so, so self-centered for small groups ministries. But that it's they don't like that idea of they're just being used for that. But at the same time, it's if you are going to do this solution, don't do it. I would recommend you don't do it in secret, but that you actually have a conversation with other staff and leadership and say, hey, here's our problem. We have these family groups with young kids. Could we use the childcare on that night? Is childcare full? Is there a space for that? Can we leverage that? Those, because those people have been fingerprinted and are safe, and it would give trust to somebody with, this is really for really young kids. The ministry one's easier. If they run like an elementary Awana program or a Bible study for kids, or even support groups like divorce recovery for kids or something like that, that's easier because they're in a ministry, whereas this is just plain straight childcare. So we've had to I think churches that use this option have to navigate and be sensitive to what the children's ministry is trying to accomplish through that, and that it's not a burden for them that's unhelpful. And unless you just don't mind being really unpopular, and then you could do it on the down low and then get chastised later.
No, I totally agree. And I wrote this solution from the lens of if your church has more of a kids ministry program, not just not just childcare. So like at Saddleback, we have our kids small group ministry during the midweek, and that's on campus here at Saddleback.
Oh,
and
that's
so,
great.
In our context, a ton of small groups with littles use this solution because it's the perfect fit where they can take their kids to small groups at the church and then literally just go to their small group right after.
Yeah, that works well, especially with the cell phone. You can always reach them afterwards, too. Another option, what's nice about this one, too, is if you do run like a middle school program or a small group program for kids, it's a great way to maybe capture some of those parents who might just be dropping off. We've launched some new small groups of middle school parents, for example, off of our midweek ministry that middle school does, because they're already there. They're just kind of, they can go to Costco and hang out or go shopping or whatever, or they could actually have a meaningful conversation with other middle school parents. So it's been a useful launch point for that. So number 5 is subsidize solution. I like the sound of that.
Yeah, the subsidized solution. And this was a big one that people were really talking about in the Facebook group. And I believe that North Point Church uses this with their groups. But in this solution, some churches are able to work into their budget the ability to subsidize each small group for a predetermined childcare cost. So in this instance, the small group is responsible, for finding their own childcare worker. And one group member, usually the small group leader or host, they'll pay the childcare worker on the day of the small group gathering. But then afterward, that group leader will fill out some kind of digital like reimbursement form, email it to the church, and the church ends up, writing them a check and mailing it to that group leader. And so this seems to be a really effective solution that's catching on more and more with small group point people, is the good old subsidized solution.
Okay, so the thing, and you're right, North Point is in Atlanta. They're the pioneers of this method. So the thing with the subsidizing thing is, one, you have to really work very closely with your church leadership on that. But also, every time this comes up on our Facebook group, part of this is probably because I live in California, which is the litigation capital of the country. And part of it is because I'm a former lawyer, but I would just caution, if you're going to do the subsidizing thing, check with your insurance carrier for your church, check with an attorney, or just make sure you kind of at least ask the question of, will this expose our church to any kind of liability? By that I mean, if you, pay money for somebody there, and this is similar to the next one we're going to talk about, number 6. This is a kind of a similar question around liability if you do the next one, as well, about using people from your youth ministry. But just to make sure that your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, and that you're not going to open the church up to liability if something goes wrong. And 99.9% of the time, nothing will go wrong. Again, this is an abundance of caution, but it's just good to ask whether, just to do the due diligence. If you're paying for it, if the church is paying for it, then there may be a little bit more of a connection if something goes wrong than if you're just doing it in private in your home and there's no issue. And that's true for accountability, especially if you have minors in the group as well. So just a caution. I'm probably a nervous Nelly about all that. But again, we do live in California, which is a unique environment for that.
Yes, it is. And you're 100% right, Carolyn. I would say to those listening, take all the steps necessary. Check with your, local church leadership and your bylaws and the state and local laws there, and just make sure you're crossing your T's, dotting your I's, and making sure that everything is right before you pull the trigger on this one. But it does seem to be, I was surprised at how big of a movement this one seems to be.
Yeah, and me too. And I can see why. And I love that churches are willing to put money towards, helping young families have community. So it's a great step towards that, just to make sure that you do some due diligence before implementing it on that. So related to that kind of is number 6. That's the partner with your youth ministry solution. And having been a youth pastor before, Derek, You see both sides of this equation.
Yes, I do. So this solution is, some churches will have a partnership with the youth ministry where responsible students can provide childcare, and the key word is responsible, can provide childcare as a ministry project for small groups in order to earn hours towards like a summer camp or a mission trip.
Right.
And so, an example would be like a student might be able to earn $10 an hour. They don't get the cash, but those hours are tracked and put towards their camp scholarship.
Hopefully you pay more than $10 an hour for your babysitter, because that is really low now.
Yeah, in California, we would say that's like $30 an hour.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's a little bit high, which is why the earlier solutions may be more apt. But yeah, that there is, and there are high school students. The trick there too, similar to subsidizing one, is that the church is basically recommending a particular student, and that student is going to be a minor. So there's a little bit of risk on both sides. So you have the student going into an environment with all adults that may or may not have been fingerprinted and checked and all of that. And of course, most groups, they wouldn't be alone with the person, with an adult, but you just don't know. So it introduces potential risk on that end. And then also, of course, if the student themselves may not, you don't know really, they may look perfectly responsible when they're at church, but you really don't know about, what they may be doing or not doing. So again, this is a cool solution for both sides, and it gives them a buy-in for camp, and it's a great way to involve other kids who want to make some money or get some credit, but it's also requires a little bit of due diligence to do it. Yeah,
and this one and the last one, the subsidize, if you're listening and you're a small group, point person, these are ideas that you could think about implementing top level across your small group ministry. If you're more of a small group leader or host and you're listening, both of these are, this last one is number 6, is obviously going to be done more through relationship.
Exactly. That's a great point.
Yeah. So like at a small group we led in Seattle, we found a student in our church that was just a great girl. Like, she was super mature for her age. We had relationship with her for a while before the small group. We trusted her parents. So that was a situation like this where we weren't necessarily partnering with the youth ministry, but we were partnering with a youth who we totally trusted to watch our kids and do projects. And she was just amazing. And we were able to, help her towards camp and stuff like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this one really relationally makes more sense. We've had groups that have hired some of our childcare workers and volunteers. Like they'll be used to seeing a certain volunteer, and they could be a younger high schooler onward, or it could be an older person that works in the nursery, every week. And they'll ask, can you come and babysit for our small group? And they're all fingerprinted and checked, and it's extra money for them. So we've sometimes facilitated that. But that's also done very relationally. It's because they'll say, oh, Miss Joan is so sweet with our kids, and they all know her. And they ask her, and if she wants to, that's totally on her, completely separate from the church. Okay, so number 7, the all-family group solution. That sounds so warm, fuzzy. I like that. All family in together.
Yeah, don't you love how I packaged that? The all-family group solution. And this one is really more of a state of mind. So when all else fails, when none of these other solutions or nothing else is working, this is basically embracing the idea that your group is an all-family group where, hey, we're going to do a small group the best we can with kids. And the kids are, in this scenario, they're allowed to play in the same room as the meeting is. Obviously, this works best when the kids are small and they're not likely to understand or catch much of what's being said in a discussion.
And you have your intimate conversation about marriage and conflict.
The positive of this is that families grow together. It's a true family growing relationship. The challenge, obviously, is that you're going to really need to limit discussion time. And I think the key for this one to work is is creating a real flexible plan in advance.
Yes.
That's tailored around the kid, so that you're not setting yourself up for just a aneurysm, anger meltdown, right? So real flexible, tailored around the kids. And also something you can do is, if you have older kids in this scenario, or even, again, trusted teens, give them some incentives to help play with the kids, help lead them on a project maybe during the discussion. But the idea is that everybody's together, so you're not really worried about, childcare in another room or somewhere else. Right. It's just all boom right there.
And there are some pluses to it. So you forgot to mention the VeggieTale option. That was really important for us in our family group. So VeggieTale really became our babysitter, and that works for kids that aren't quite as young, where they need someone's eyeballs near them. But once they're in about kindergarten onward, you actually can, because you have older siblings. And I love that, to incentivize the older sibling to say, hey, now you guys can do this together and care for the younger ones. It teaches them really great things about community, about leadership, and it was like an honor for the older kids. We had a bit of a gap to start watching out for the younger kids, and kind of managing that. And then they would come to us and we would give them a little bit of money. But there are ways to do that feels more family. And as you mentioned, it really is, you kind of have to embrace it. You have to embrace the messiness of it. You have to embrace that you're going to be disrupted. They're going to be shrieking things, and there's going to be breaking things. But the season when we did that for a number of years, and it got easier as the kids got a little bit older and could watch a video or do play on their own for a little bit longer, was that we felt like they had extended family. Our family don't live near us. And recently studies have shown, Fuller Institute did a youth study, the number one factor that correlated with kids following Jesus after leaving high school was how many adults have invested in them in the church. And that was so powerful, because we realized it's not enough just to have the typical youth pastor, and then maybe they have a small group leader, depending on the size of the church and whatnot. And then they have the parents, but it gave them aunties and uncles. And by doing that for several years, like, we built in and invested in the other kids as well. And we gave each other, and I love the covenant idea, or to have the expectations up front. I think this is so critical, because you're dealing with people's kids, and people are very touchy about how they parent, how they discipline, what's okay, what's not okay, what rules. So I think to negotiate that up front, and we gave each other permission, not right away. This took a little bit of time. Maybe we were together about a year or so, and say, hey, I trust you, and you're like an aunt an uncle in my kids' lives. So you are welcome to discipline them if we're not around. You would discipline them the way you would discipline your own children. And in that group of 5 families, we had very different disciplining models from, so we said, what is not okay? Okay, you can't do X, but if you see them do something, you can call them on it. Like, we kind of actually had a very challenging but really, really good conversation around what is okay, so we can agree on how we would, even when we did the swap or the trade, if we're responsible for, your kids at that time, what is okay and what's not. And it really built deeper community. And the kids got to have that with the different adults and see how they follow Jesus a little differently in their personalities and stuff. The adults got to invest in the kids. And so that was a byproduct we didn't expect when we had no choice, which is why we ended up with the all-in model. But then it ended up being a blessing in some way. So I think maybe with any of the childcare models, Derek, would you just say, if whichever one you choose, I mean, you kind of have to embrace it and then just allow God to work through it.
Absolutely. Embrace it. Be flexible.
And it's for such a short season, because they grow up so fast.
And I like what you shared, Carolyn, about, having the spiritual uncles and aunts. And I think that's the biggest bonus of sharing, in a small group family. Mm-hmm. Embracing a small group family is, in our age of single parenting.
Yeah. Especially valuable for them. Yeah.
Yeah. A child or a teen who doesn't have a dad.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Can have spiritual dads. Mm-hmm. In a small group. I mean, that is such a beautiful picture of the church and God's answer to brokenness and fractured relationships. And again, back to the all family group solution, I think that's the biggest bonus of that one, is just that your kids are going to be surrounded, hopefully, by loving uncles and aunts and moms and dads.
And some siblings. They end up having some siblings that they squabble with and have adventures fishing with, but still end up being people, our kids are still, they're in college now, and they're still on Instagram and stuff, and they'll comment on other kids, because that was such a season and it was an impactful one, because really you spend so much time together if you do it consistently. So whichever solution one chooses, it's such a blessing, and you get to shape the life of the children as well as the adults. So it's a hard thing to do, but it's worth working at, because your family will miss out. And as you mentioned, the single parents, especially the single parents, it is such an act of love to include them in that. And they just so appreciate that. That helps a lot. So any other final thoughts, Derek, you want to share before we end?
Final thoughts is I'm going to give you a bonus solution real quick.
Ooh. And
you actually kind of already hit on it. You had a different name for it, but I call it the pool your money together solution.
That sounds better than whatever it is I said. Pool your money together. Yes.
Yeah. So this is like, this is kind of one of those, if all else fails, each couple, basically, or parent, can bring a couple dollars to combine with everybody else's. And again, even if it's only for like an hour or 2 hours, hire a quality childcare worker to look after the kids in a separate area while all the adults get to enjoy the discussion with minimal interruption. And the best part of this is nobody goes broke. Yes.
No, the pooling thing is real. It really helps, especially if you're in a state where babysitting costs are high. Because a small meeting could cost you, $50 if you hang out for a while. So it's really nice to pool the money together if you have somebody in mind. So that's a really practical one. I think most of our groups actually do that. Yeah. They found that to be more useful. So, Derek, thank you so much for diving into this very necessary topic. And now you've got other ideas to try, so that no more shenanigans for your poor daughter. Did you replace the fish?
We did replace the fish.
Oh, you're a good dad.
With I didn't realize there were so many different breeds of betta fish, but we had your average betta fish, and then I found out there's an emperor betta fish, and he's twice as big and colorful, and my daughter loves him. So whenever
she an upgrade.
Whenever the small group comes over, though, we've now learned to hide him and put him up away from their reach.
And there you go. That's such a great story. It's so typical of the kinds of stuff that happens. We've had stuff that kids have tried to flush. We've had all kinds of interesting things. So thanks so much, Derek. So Derek's part of the small group huddle in Orange County. He's super active on the page, of course. And if you have any questions about this topic or anything regarding Small Group Network, Derek's the guy to talk to. So if you'd like to get involved and you're not yet involved with our network, you can email him at derek@smallgroupnetwork.com, and you can reach out to him. They're very social media as well. So thank you, Derek, for all you do and for these ideas. And we're so blessed by you and your ministry. So God bless you as you continue with your family small group. And now you've got other ideas to try.
Man, now I'm going to have to edit my blog. Thanks a lot.
We can expand it some more. Well, thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Carolyn.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening to Group Talk. We will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Here to There, part of the Group Talk network of podcasts. If you like what you've heard, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. If you want to learn more, make sure you check out smallgroupnetwork.com for more resources.